Quiet, quiet now please. Joseph, this also includes you. Thank you. So, how far did we come last week in our history of climate change? Oh yes, we covered the beginnings. In 2020, drastic climate changes forced all governments to stop any kind of CO2 emissions, and from then on cities had to run entirely on green or plant energy. But the extreme weather changes had already drastically reduced the biodiversity of our planet. Hardly any plants or animals could survive outside anymore, and people mostly stayed indoors. The only green you can see in the city was functional and especially developed to survive the climate. No more beautiful colours, shapes or smells. This leads us to Patrick Presinos and his grandmother Rose. In 2040, Patrick was a PhD researcher at Kew Botanical Gardens. He was developing a protective substance that made it possible for natural plants to be able to grow in the harsh outdoor conditions. Patrick is bent over his hydroponic plant farm. In the background, a news story reports on the guerrilla gardening movement, a radical action group fighting for biodiversity. Suddenly, a ringing wakes Patrick from his thoughts. It's his grandmother, Rose, on his green screen, asking excitedly about his board meeting with Kew. Patrick tells her that they denied his request to use seeds from the seed bank to test his proposal. The seeds were deemed to be too valuable for student experiments, and would mean his research would come to nothing. Rose is shocked. How could that be? Doesn't Kew realise this thesis is the answer? A few days later, Patrick and Rose meet at the entrance of Kew. In the midst of this terrible weather, Kew looks like a haven of tranquility. Due to its high value because of research and conservation, the gardens need to be heavily protected. A protective canopy covers Kew completely. Its breathing membrane preserves a stable climate all year round. One area within Kew is known as the living history, and has remained the same for 400 years. In another area we find the super plants, where developments from Kew's research centre are shown. Some of these are for sale in the Kew shop. Apart from the beautiful natural environment, we can also admire functional plants that are being developed by Kew. Those are, for example, air purifiers, shade facades, instant degrading bins, or willows of silence. Here you can experience their functions by interacting with them. Rose urges Patrick not to give up his research. Already people are beginning to forget about the time when plants grew outdoors. Maybe he should consider taking more drastic actions, even if that means getting the seeds illegally. But Patrick refuses. How could he ever be proud of his work if it was done in such an unethical way? Neither of them are aware that all this time they're being secretly observed. The following day, Patrick is researching again when his grandmother's been kidnapped by the guerrilla gardening movement, and in order to see her alive again, he must deliver seeds from the Millennium Seed Bank, treated with his protective substance. What was Patrick to do? He owes his grandmother everything. He got his love for plants from her. She's all he has in the world. He must save her. Breaking in the seed bank is the only option. One way or another, Patrick managed to break into the Kew research labs, a secret area of dangerous and experimental plant research. No one knows what goes on inside, and even today it remains a subject of vivid imagination and conspiracy theories. Then, finally, the seed bank. Endless rows of vaults open up to him, containing the only remaining samples of thousands and thousands of natural plants. Then, finally, he's holding in his hands the only hope of ever restoring the natural ecosystem, and saving his grandmother Rose, of course. The mission was successful, and thanks to his efforts, biodiversity has been restored and we can live in these green and rich conditions. After the break-in, for some reason Patrick broke all contact with his grandmother, and what became of him is still a mystery. Off you go now. Have a nice weekend all.